A Karbi villager died on October 9 in fresh clashes along the Meghalaya-Assam border. The incident took place at Lapangap in West Jaintia Hills that shares its borders with Tapat village in Karbi Anglong district of Assam. The embers have been burning since June when there were allegations against the Karbi Anglong Autonomous District Council of hindering agricultural activities. The Meghalaya government deployed police to keep the situation under control. However, the situation went out of control on October 9 and villagers from both sides clashed during harvesting. A 45-year-old Karbi villager, identified as Orivel Timong, died in the clashes. When I visited the village on October 11th, there was an eerie silence at Lapanga. The headman said that the village was disputed, no doubt, but it was never disturbed until 2019. In 2019, the Karbi villagers allegedly tried to construct a blacktop road and the road passed through a land in Lapanga. In 2019, the Karbi villagers of Tapat tried to construct a blacktop road and the road passed through a piece of land that belonged to Lapangap. These incidents of violence continue even as both states struggle to find a permanent solution to the border dispute. Assam shares about 885-kilometer long border with Meghalaya, and along this long stretch there are 12 areas of difference. The two states have a long history of border dispute. The worst case in recent years was the one at Mukroh in 2022 when 5 villagers were killed in Assam police firing. That incident was a rerun of the violence that took place in 2003 when Karbi militants gunned down 6 villagers. You can read details of the Mukroh violence, exclusive interviews of villagers, the judicial probe and other related reports by clicking on the link in the description. Now coming back to the time and history of violent events along the Meghalaya-Assam border. In 2023, videos of clashes between villagers of Lapangap and Tapat went viral. The villagers were seen confronting each other with bows and arrows. In the past, Langpih in West Khasi Hills had witnessed recurring violence. The village shares its border with Kamrup district in Assam. The history of violence in the village can be traced back to 1974 when Meghalaya police forcefully evicted some villagers belonging to the Nepali community. The victims approached the Assam police for their protection. It was the beginning of decades of violence. Over the years, it snowballed into fierce clashes which occurred in 2010, 2012 and 2020. The Langpih dispute was discussed several times in Parliament and the legislative assemblies in Assam and Meghalaya. However, no consensus could be reached. But what is the root cause of this prolonged border dispute? Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh were carved out of the Assam province. Meghalaya became an autonomous state in 1970 and a full-fledged state in 1972. Before that, in 1951, the Bordoloi Committee recommended transferring Block 1 and Block 2 in West Jaintia Hills to the Mikir Hills, which is Karbi Anglong now. The committee also recommended transferring parts of Garo Hills to Goalpara district in Assam and the contiguous areas in now Ribhoi district in Meghalaya to Kamrup district. The Meghalaya boundary was later defined as per these transfers in the Assam Reorganization Act of 1969. However, Meghalaya refuses to recognize this act. It claims that the areas originally belonged to Meghalaya. It also claims that these areas are dominated by Khasi Panar population. Hence, these parts belong to the hill state. In its argument, Assam says that Meghalaya does not have any document to prove its ownership. Efforts to resolve this border dispute have been going on since 1980s. After several rounds of failed talks, the Meghalaya Legislative Assembly finally passed a resolution in 2011 urging the centre to intervene. The Assam Legislative Assembly called this move illegal. However, the centre finally intervened and asked the two states to recruit nodal officers to discuss the border dispute issue. In 2019, the Meghalaya government moved the Supreme Court with an appeal that the centre must intervene to resolve this issue. However, the court directed the government to approach the centre directly. Finally, in March 2022, the two states signed an agreement settling 6 of the 12 areas of difference. However, it could not douse the fire, and Mukroh and Lapangap are testimony to that. The issue is now hanging in the balance owing to the upcoming elections in Assam. Over the years, this border tension has had deep socio-economic impact. The heightened border tension has affected development and any real investment in sectors such as tourism. This is besides the loss of livelihood to poor people and disruption in daily life. Sporadic incidents of violence not only erode mutual trust among communities but also affects long-term solution to the problem. The situation is complicated and riddled with political implications, so the way to find a solution is thorny. Nonetheless, the two states must find immediate measures to keep the situation under control in these border areas. The regional committees on border dispute must act in a time-bound manner. So far, only one border pillar has been put up at Hahim. The multi-track approach to resolving the border issue is a commendable initiative, and this can be seen as an overture to an amicable solution. However, there have been reports of villagers complaining that they were excluded in the process. In fact, the headman at Lapangap too complained that no regional committee member visited before or after the violence. The state governments must consider these allegations and misgivings so that these do not derail the process. There must be a constant process of communication between the administration and the local people along vulnerable border areas. This will help in confidence building on both sides. There should also be joint patrolling so that any kind of violence can be averted. An important measure that should be taken is digitization of all data that is being collected in the form of interviews and field visits. And all this data must be put in the public domain for transparency. But beyond everything, what is required is a strong political will on both sides. The border dispute cannot be an election gimmick or a subject of petty politicking. Both states must see beyond and look at the broader socio-economic implications and act swiftly. 50 years is a long enough time for both states to demarcate permanent borders. Now it is time to expedite the work and at least finish the first phase of border demarcation. You can read the full story on Lapangap by clicking on the link in the description.